So Courtlandt, we just hit two high points. One was the affirmation of the immigrant, the sojourner, the foreigner in the form of a resolution. The other one is renouncing the curse of Ham, also a high point. One, I should say, murky point of the whole thing that really almost cast a shadow over the entire event, it seems to me on social media, was the appearance of Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. So what is the initial response out there to his appearance, in your estimation?
Yeah, I think initially before the actual appearance did happen, I think many in the room and attending felt blindsided just because it was, kind of came out of nowhere. The convention seemed to be moving in such a less controversial direction, and this happens or this is about to happen. So I think many just kind of felt confused or frustrated. I know me personally, I just felt like, man, just especially after last year, this was another opportunity for Southern Baptists to continue to make a stand for what we all can agree upon as far as why we cooperate. And then, unfortunately, this appearance seemed to support a narrative that that SBC, excuse me, that SBC and GOP go hand in hand. And I think that was frustrating. Just in the initial news that it was happening, and then as we can get a little bit into kind of how it all happened and the response from him coming. But yeah, initially those were, I think, my sentiments echo the sentiments of many who expressed on social media, at least.
Yeah, I think coming out of 16, it's hard for the person who's standing by from looking from a distance to who's not there on the ground to say, you know what, that's the 80%,
right?
Southern Baptist,
right?
So it almost makes it seem like Southern Baptists are the 80% who voted for President Trump. They're evangelical, or white evangelical to be specific. So there's a lot to say here, but so I thought it would be helpful to walk through the process of how this came about and just some of the different things and dynamics that were going on there on the ground to kind of help unpack this for those who were not able to be in the room. Because my sentiment overall is that the content of Vice President Pence's speech that he actually gave does not represent where Southern Baptists are. And I think in telling of the story and just kind of telling of the feeling on the ground there in Dallas sort of helps to unpack that a little bit. So initially, for most of us, even for myself as the first vice president of the convention, this information was told to me at a meeting on Sunday. And what we were told was that the vice president had contacted the convention. I think there might have been some confusion about, did we contact the White House to have either the president or the vice president come? No, that's not the case. Pence's office contacted us to see if they could do something that was actually very specific, which was to thank Southern Baptists for being part of the moral fabric of America. And so it was decided with President Gaines and the chairman of the Committee on Order of Business, Grant Etheridge, that he would come and he would have 15 minutes to talk about just to celebrate morality in America. Unfortunately, that's not actually what happened, which we'll get to that in just a moment. But so it was them contacting the convention, and then because Grant Etheridge, who was the chairman on the Committee on Order of Business, who actually makes the schedule for the convention, and he says, well, we're going to respect the office, regardless of who is actually in the chair, in the vice presidency, we're going to respect the office. And in his, when we got in the room, and this was after this was announced to the convention, what we have to do is, because we're very Baptistic, we have to vote on everything.
Right.
We even have to vote on to accept the order of business that the Committee on Order of Business, the schedule that they drew up for us.
Right.
And so what happened is that there was motions, basically, questions and people saying, hey, we don't want, him on the schedule for Wednesday. Grant Etheridge got up as the representative from the denomination and said, "Well, we wanted to honor the office because the office of the vice presidency came to us and asked this question." And then he says, for example, if Barack Obama was in office and I was in this role, I would let him come because he requested to come and he's the president. And as I sat there and I heard that, I was a little bit skeptical. And I can't help but to think that there were other people there in the convention hall or who were watching on the live stream. They were like, but the thing is, that didn't happen.
Right.
So we don't know if you're telling the truth or not.
Right.
So to be honest with you, I met Grant Etheridge for the first time on Sunday in the meeting where I was told the VP was coming. But then, he and I, we were having some conversation and he says, he says, Walter, understand, I mean this. And he began to tell me about how he was a pastor in Arkansas. And there's a university called Ouachita Baptist College or University, I forget which one it is, but Ouachita Baptist. And Bill Clinton was in office, and he is from, as you guys know, Arkansas. He asked to come to Ouachita Baptist College, I think is what it is, to address the student body and the faculty and the staff. And Grant Etheridge, he took a stand to say, well, if the president asked to come, you let him come because of respecting the office. And he actually almost lost his job over that. And so I say all that to say, Grant Etheridge is a man of his word. He was being honest when he made that statement, which I think that is actually shows his integrity. And the thing is, although I respect the office as well, and so does he, I would have expressed my respect for it in a different way than allowing the vice presidency to have a presence on the order of business at the convention. Right. But he's someone that I can have a brotherly disagreement with because at least he's a man of his word. Mm-hmm. And so with that said, Etheridge was respecting the office as he had done for both Republicans and Democrats alike. But after it was brought to the convention, there was actually a motion to take Pence off and to have that 15 minutes that he was slated for to be used as a time of prayer. And ironically, or not ironically, but there was actually, it was a 60-40 vote. I mean, granted, we didn't have everybody count, right. But as far as ballots up and down, it was guessed that it was either 60-40 or 35, 65 or whatever the other percentage would be. I can't do that, but I think 10 years ago, a motion to take the vice president off of the ballot for the sake of having our banner not be any party, but the gospel and our mission in Christ and our shared passion for the Great Commission. I don't think that the convention would have even made a motion to take him off, much less voted 60-40 to take him off. And what I think is interesting is that just because someone was in the 60% doesn't mean that they were for the policies of the vice president. Right. But they were either they might have been for the policies of the administration, because some folks are there, and I'm not even saying it's like 10%. It could be 45, 50%. I don't know. But there were some in that 60% that didn't vote for the motion, that were probably just, let's respect the office as well. And so, it was just, it was a lot of unrest in the convention. Isn't that what you experienced, Courtlandt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people chose not to go in to the what was supposed to be just 15 minutes. People chose not to go in. I mean, because it was a whole ordeal. I mean, basically had TSA set up outside. I mean, obviously it's the Vice President of the United States. Security was on high alert as far as just making sure nothing could have ever popped off. But yeah, I think that all that going on just made a lot of people uncomfortable with this happening. So many who were actually in the room chose to sit. Many chose to stand outside and pray for our country and for our convention. So there's just a lot of mixed emotions and a feeling of kind of angst that this appearance produced that you may not have been able to really catch wind of just by reading tweets and different statements that came out about it, but it was actually being there. You could see that it wasn't just like the room wasn't just full of people standing and clapping for everything that the vice president had to say. That picture that I think a lot got out does not tell the full story of what really happened.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, there were the moments where there were standing ovations for the vice president.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say standing ovations, just clapping.
Yeah.
And again, from the live stream and from Twitter, it might have sounded like that was just a 100% affirmation of everyone who was there, and that was not the case. I mean, it was a very tenuous moment.
Yeah.
In the room, not only when the agenda was adopted for the 2 days, but even when the vice president was there. And so my anticipation, especially since Vice President Pence, he came to us and gave us the topic that he wanted to talk about, which was celebrating morality, and then he didn't do that. He delivered what people would call a stump speech or a political speech about partisan issues. I'm actually thinking that there's going to be a change in our bylaws voted on next year. Someone is going to bring a motion that we accept new bylaws that deal directly with, do we or do we not have political figures at our events? And so there was actually one motion that came up to say, you know what, let's not have anybody, but only the mayor of the city that's hosting the Southern Baptist Convention to welcome us, to the city, which I think that's appropriate.
Sure.
So I really can see something like that coming back and being voted on and affirmed next year, because even the 60% who were, who voted to keep the agenda with Vice President Pence on there, some of them dialed it back and said, you know what, he didn't come and he didn't do what he said he was going to do, and he took longer than 15 minutes. It was like 45 minutes. And so, I mean, I think we just got duped.
Yep.
I think we just became a pawn.
Yep.
And so even people who might be for the administration are saying, you know what, we need to reevaluate what our priorities are and make sure that the agenda focus us all on our priorities, which is the gospel and mission and collaboration for those purposes.
Yeah.
And so I fully expect to see some bylaw changes in the future in this regard. So it's almost like this instance sort of forced a bigger conversation about God and country and the wedding of the two. As you said, is GOP synonymous with SBC? And the answer to that is no. And I think that forced us to answer the question with it. It just forced us to ask and answer the question. I don't think we would have answered the question as explicitly because there would have been no reason to explicitly answer the question. Does that sound fair?
No, absolutely. I think that while much frustration and warranted frustration for what had happened in his appearance, I think it's pushed us to have to address things that wouldn't have had to be addressed if it didn't happen. So for that, I'm grateful for the future conversations and the conversations that happened in Dallas that hopefully will move us in a direction where we can keep the main thing, especially as we gather for a convention and not be sidetracked by another occurrence like this. So yeah, I think it's definitely forced a conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm. And to settle any questions, at Southeastern, we respect the office of the presidency of the United States. We respect the office of the vice presidency of the United States.
Sure.
But there's appropriate places to show that respect, and there's places that are set aside for a particular type of business.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the Southern Baptist Convention, and when it meets on a national level, on a state level, and at an associational level, that all of those spaces are dedicated to something far greater than any person representing any political party. And that's for the glory of Jesus Christ and his fame to be known and his mission to be considered and for us to be excited about. And that's what goes on at these meetings and nothing more.
Amen.
And so this sort of brings us to our closing point. But as a bridge to that, I think this bigger conversation about sort of politics in the SBC, the new president, just the transparency about sin and about different issues, and the demographic makeup of the convention this year that we've talked about. I think what this is going to do is press us back into that which brought us together, which is the things that we do best. And we saw this with the commissioning of some 78 missionaries to the International Mission Board, because that's why we collaborate.
Yeah.
And that's what we do as a people. And so that's what we want to front.
Absolutely.
So this cooperative effort, this 78 people that we're sending out. So this is why we come together. This is the beauty of cooperation. Mm-hmm. And so cooperation is a beast. Because in order to cooperate anywhere, but especially for women, people of color, and people who've been on the margins of the Southern Baptist narrative, it becomes, what's the price of cooperation?
Right. And
so just give me your thoughts about this. Should we cooperate? Mm-hmm. To what? How much should we sacrifice to cooperate? And just because these questions are swirling in our milieu right now. Absolutely.
This question brings also the question of why guys like ourselves, African American men, would be a part of an institution that, while yes, came together to cooperate for the sake of missions, but also came together to maintain the status quo in regards to slavery in 1845. And we could have a whole nother video about the ills of slavery and the ways in which churches have been complicit in supporting the white supremacist agenda. That grieves me, and that never will be something that is just kind of a sidebar comment, just to kind of appease people, but something that grieves and should grieve all Christians. But nonetheless, the Southern Baptist Convention and the cooperation that we are able to have supports a reality that I think is clear throughout the scriptures, especially I think about 2 Corinthians, think about the way Paul talks about the Philippian church, just this reality that churches have always sought to help each other out for the sake of advancing the gospel in places that it has not been advanced. And at the end of the day, cooperation involves engaging with people who you disagree with. And I'm not saying that we have to play softball with racists or racist ideologies. We confront those things with the truth. But I do want my brother or sister who maybe does have prejudice in their hearts. I don't want to throw them away because they're a person at the end of the day. And if there's people still within the SBC, which, we're going to make the audacious claim that yes, this probably still is, who does have these sentiments. At the end of the day, I want to see that person changed and redeemed and see them repent. So our presence here, while we do what we do here on campus, is with that in mind. It's with that person that changing. It's with the realities that person doesn't speak for or define the convention as a whole or Southern Baptist churches as a whole. That there's so many brothers who I met, so many sisters who I met just in Dallas who are doing great work for the Lord all over this country, doing great work all over the world, and using what we're able to do through the cooperative program in order to do it. So with that said, the cooperation is mandated from Scripture, from Christians to work together. And we have the unique opportunity to play a part in the redemptive narrative, particularly in regards to Southern Baptists, in which it's starting off in a place that it started, and hopefully its future is so much more different, so much more diverse, and so much more inclusive than its beginnings. And I think that's worth investing in. That's why I'm a part. That's why I'm in it. And I think that the cooperation that we're able to be a part of is something that God's pleased with.
Yeah, I think something that you said is very important, is that it's easy to make one person and on a single issue representative of the entire Southern Baptist Convention. You have one person who's wrong on one thing, and so all of a sudden the Southern Baptist Convention thinks this.
Yep.
and that person is just on an island, perhaps by themselves or with a few of their closest friends in a big ocean of people. And so, something that we shouldn't do is see people as a single issue as well. A lot, as to your point, if somebody is, not biblically sound on a certain point, and you mentioned the point of white supremacy and being, some churches and some believers and pastors even being complicit in those ideologies. I think the most prevalent way that happens is a sort of subconscious sort of participation in those things, not really a conscious participation in that reality. So, when you hear that, don't think, oh, I'm not out burning crosses, but just this sort of status quo, not intentionally undoing those things that have been intentionally done, and that is sort of participating in that ongoing work. If it's not intentionally undone. Mm-hmm. And so there are those who have grown up in those waters, who have been influenced by them, who would rather not be anymore. But it takes somebody to come alongside of them and say, hey, brother, that right there and that right there are not kosher with Scripture. That's not in line with what the Bible is doing. That's not, the gospel needs to be applied to those. They need to be sanctified out of your life. And so I think a very helpful point that can come out of this big conversation about cooperation, out of this big conversation about we have to get together and do more that we can, more than we can together as individuals, is the fact that if we disagree with somebody on one point, it doesn't mean that we jump out of the boat with them. Mm. We have to be long-suffering with each other. We have to be those who sharpen each other as iron sharpens iron. We have to be those who are quick to listen, slow to speak, but at the same time speak truth in love, because we actually want to not just bruise, but heal our brother from this thing that, this bigotry or this misogyny or this whatever it might be that's hindering not just them, but others around them. So it's a deterrent to the cooperation, for the sake of the gospel.
Absolutely.
And so I think that this cooperation takes maturity. Not to say that everyone has to be a Southern Baptist, not everyone has to be, cooperating with everybody, because you just can't do that. But, no matter what boat you're in, don't be quick to jump out just because someone might have a disagreement with you, especially if it's not on issues of Christ, the atonement, the salvation, and these sorts of things, because of those things, you actually have a foothold to actually transform and to help and to sharpen each other. Yeah. And so I'm grateful to be a Southern Baptist today more than I was about a week and a half ago, because going into the convention, there was so many fault lines, so many different fights that could have been picked, so many different landmines laying around, that by God's grace, we missed the majority of them and we hit a couple square on. Yep. But at the same time, this is a family. A family is a mess. I got a family reunion coming up next month. It's going to be 150 of us in Tyler, Texas, and it will be a mess. And so, but at the same time, we love going back. We love seeing our people. And I'm going to hug my crazy uncle around his neck and be like, I love you, man. And so to all my crazy uncles out there in the SBC, this one's for you. But anyway, but Courtlandt, thank you for your reflections. Thank you for the time. Thank you for listening. This is a special edition of From the Lectern. This is Courtlandt Perkins, Dr. Strickland here, thanking you from the campus of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. For more information about the college or the seminary here, go to sebts.edu. For more information about Kingdom Diversity, you can follow us on Twitter at K_diversity. You can go to our website at kingdomdiversity.sebts.edu. Grace and peace.